Welcome to My Community. It is your weekly program that allows Barbadians to share that rich history and heritage of their communities and so enrich the lives of all of us. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for joining us. As we continue our journey in the parish of St. Michael, the program this week is carried by Dr. George Belle in that evocative style that has always characterized Dr. Belle. He takes us on an exciting and intriguing journey of his childhood community and surrounding areas. Take it over, Doc.
Well, my great-grandfather was apparently employed as, I suppose in today's terms, they call him some kind of engineer. He knew all the pipes for the water under the city, and he also used to check all the government buildings. And he had a lot of tools that he would go on. He had to tap the wall and all that kind of stuff. So I've seen some of them that say whether they got problems with the walls in the merchant buildings down Him Street or anywhere in Bridgetown and so on, or even on the plantations. But he was the man that knew how the layout was in town. And he's also supposed to have played a part in the construction of the Mutual building, the one with the domes. Okay? So that is George Francis Bell. My father was living at his place in James Street. My mother now, she used to live in at 34 Tudor Street, which if you go up Tudor Street from James Street, you'll see a building that's slightly out in the road. All those houses used to have verandas. So the veranda used to be even further out. And that is where we were born. All 7 Bell children were born there. So my father apparently must have met my mother as he came out of James Street, and she came out of Tudor Street and went down South Street to St. Mary's Church. And then eventually he moved then to 34 Tudor Street. Because that building just sticks out a little bit more than the others, the transport board buses, when there were passengers, they hit it a lot. So every now and then, you hear a collision out there. And the balcony won't actually come down to see these supports under the balcony. Well, those supports would get pushed out of alignment, and the transport board will come and repair them. So my father writing in a number of times saying, come and repair the damage that you all have done. So you just hit the balcony again. I also remember my grandmother, we used to call her Mama. When she died about 1958, and the casket was inside of the living room before she went to be buried. Yeah, people used to come into the house to look at the dead body inside the house. My mother is Evelyn Meta Gwendolyn, or Gwendolyn, Evelyn Gwendolyn Meta Bell. Well, she was Daniel. So her father was Charles Daniel. As I said, my grandfather then was, my great-grandfather on that side was Thomas Daniel. They were merchant seamen. And she married then CBS Bell. And the children are Harriet, is the oldest girl. There's 7 of us. Mary, Ingrid, Ermine, the psychiatrist, Charlie, who was in the defense force, and Francis, who was the judge now. And I was the first boy. And we lived in 34 Tudor Street right up to when I was 9 years old. And then we moved from there and went to Fontebelle to Cheapside, really. We were at the top end of Cheapside as you go over to Lakes Folly and into Fontebelle. Cheapside will run all the way then down to St. Mary's Church. But before I got there, I just wanted to go through to show you some of the people that lived in town. Completely different from how it is now. Next to our house at 34 Tudor Street, you would have Douglas Reese's Bakery. And Douglas Reese, he died relatively young. Sometimes you still see his picture being put in the death notices and things with a fellow with a hat. And his wife used to have a shop in Black Rock, just as you come up from Brighton. She used to have a shop there, maintaining the tradition of baking bread and so on. So they used to be right next door to us. The way our house was constructed in 34 Tudor Street, I had some big steps. I actually lost a lot of my teeth as a little boy sliding down those steps and fell off. But we could look down into the bakery and see the bakers operating. So we used to see them making the bread and then carrying it down to the oven and pushing it in the oven. And we could see observe all of that from our house upstairs. Okay? And then next to Reese, you would have, I think it was Ferguson Pharmacy. There's George Ferguson's family. And Captain George Ferguson, if you might too young, you young to know him, right? Sitting down in front of Douglas Reese's shop was a woman that they called Monty, and she used to sell all kind of sugar cakes, glassies they call them, and then nuts as well. We could go downstairs anytime and buy from her, and she used to give you extra things because of the fact that we were right there, you know. And so she would sit down there, a kind of plumpish woman, very pretty tray, and sold there every day. So you go down to Ferguson Pharmacy, and then there's an alley. I don't know if it's still there. It must be still there. When you just as you go down like 3 houses from 34 through the street, you'll see an alley, a very narrow alley. I won't walk through there now because I feel like that'll be a setup for a hold up. Okay? Because you don't have no space to move, right? But we used to use it as a shortcut to get out into Mason Hall Street. What you would do is you go through that alley, and then you would come out Reed Street. You would have to cross Reed Street and go into another alley. I think that alley's name is Hudson Alley. And that would carry you straight to Mason Hall Street. Now that would stop you from having to walk all the way up by Baxter's Road and come around. So you'd be able to go across and get to Mason Hall Street as a shortcut. And we went to St. Mary's School, St. Mary's Infant School, and St. Mary's Junior School, so it was a shortcut for us. So we used to go through that alley and get to Mason Hall Street quickly. Further, when we came out in Mason Hall Street, our grandfather's house now was right there. So that we used to get lunch, for instance, when we went to school, we had to eat lunch at our grandfather's house. He was a turner, and he had set up his factory more or less right there in Mason Hall Street next to the house. If you went in there, you would see a big wheel that probably as high as this room, and there was a fellow that used to turn it like this. And then it would come, you have these leather parts coming down to the lap, I think it's the lathe or what they call it. And it would be turning this smaller unit. And he then he would have on his glasses, and with this whole set of chisels, very pretty chisels. There's like a set of chisels, almost like a surgeon's knives, you know? And he would be there and he would carve the thing out on the wood. And then each one of those pieces could go into a chair or a desk or anything else. And he also used to do some industrial work, which was turning those big wheels that the electric company and the telephone company would use for putting wire on. He would make those. So that's how he operated. And we would go down there every Sunday night to after church. We would be carried there, but during the week when we went to school, we would also go there for lunch and then come home. And then some place called the Spark, which was like a rum shop, a big fancy rum shop bar. That was on the other side of the alley. And then you would have Zephyr's Bakery. Either in front or before that or after that, the Hurleys used to live, the family called the Hurleys. They also had Carl Bruhagen's studio. So he was upstairs. And one of the bus was a bust of my mother's face, actually. She had a head. That was, my mother was the model. And then you had 8C Walks. And I think the 8C Walks sign is still there in through the street now, although 8C Walks is not there. But 8C Walks was one of the most prominent of the pharmacists. And we could go in there anytime as children, and he had a set of jars, sweet jars on the counter, and we could put our hand inside, and he wouldn't charge us. He just tell us to take the sweets and go ahead, okay? And his daughter was my mother's goddaughter. So she used to come by us every Thursday with a bag of sweets. And we used to look forward to that she would have these bag of sweets, and they were waiting for her to come over on Thursdays. After the Walkses, the Millers had a tamarind place there, where this Freddie Miller, like Billy Miller's father and so on, those Millers used to go around and collect tamarinds and carry them in there, and then I don't know if there's to make sauces or whatever to them. And there was also some activity that used to go on there. I remember sitting down in the veranda for hours watching a set of trucks with bags. I'm presuming that they're sugar bags coming down from the sugar factories. They would turn in there and then come out and then come back out and go down the wharf. There were those old time 1950s trucks. When you see them, they look almost like that faces. I used to actually know them by the face. So I would say that bus named Tom or whatever, and so on, you know. And I'd be watching them coming in and going out. The other thing that would be happening in the veranda, we used to play games in the veranda. You know, hide and seek and all those kind of things, right up to night time. You'd be out there playing. And then sometimes you would have the equivalent of the tuck bands coming down. And they had something called Lady Katie would be on stilts. So when the tuck band is coming down, the Lady Katie could reach right up to our veranda and we would run inside because it was so frightening, right? The person would come down the road and you hear him bup, and then they come right up the veranda and look in the veranda. And all of us would run through the door to get away from this Lady Katie. And the bar would continue down through the street down to the milk market. As you went up through the street again, after walks, after the tamarind place, they had two bakeries again, or at least showing there's Purity and Diamond Bakery. And then you had Reed Street. Now, Reed Street is going to carry you, if you go through Reed Street, you go right across to Saddle Street. At the top of Reed Street, you had a set of people living there too as well. So like, H.C. Watts's daughter used to live in Reed Street with her aunt and uncle. That house had a parrot in it. So this parrot had a real elaborate vocabulary. So we used to have a lot of fun with that parrot. It was green and yellow and red feathers and so on. And she's the same one that used to come by us every Thursday with the sweets. You would go past Reed Street now, and they had this place that used to sell bicycles. They used to remember the man's name, but I know that you would pass his place and go around, and when you go around, he was right on the bend there before you get to Mason Hall Street, and then you return to Mason Hall Street. So if we didn't go through the alley, that is the road that we would take to get to first junior school, and then the infant school. Infant school is the one closer to St. Mary's Church. And down there, the Seeleys used to live, the Austin Seeley family, and so on, Ken Seeley and all of them. They had about 4 Seeley houses, two on the side there on Mason Hall Street, and then when you go around by St. Mary's Church, that gate on that side, it's Settle Street. They would have 2 houses there as well. So the Seeleys used to live there. And one of them used to teach at the infant school as well. That school, when I did my research for my PhD in England, I was reading the liberal papers. That school is where Samuel Chapman Prescott held his meetings. But it's burnt down now. And that is a loss, a historical loss. The people used to be inside the school and in the yard looking in. And he would be in there holding his meetings. And but I think they neglected it. Some powers went in and burned it down. And so it's lost no historic. Now let's take the structure that is there, it's just a kind of bone structure now, and rebuild it. I think it's worth doing that, but I don't know if anybody never showed enough interest in it prior to that they would show it. No. I went to the infant school first, and Miss Grant was the headmistress, a brown-skinned woman, very, very erect and very perfect and thing. And I remember in those days when you went to school the first day, I don't know why you wouldn't be in a uniform, but I apparently had on a Sailor Doll suit. So when I hit the school, she said, "Here comes Master George." Okay, and I always remember that. So Master George went into the school. You would have spent, I think it's 2 years or something like that. You go at 5 and then you leave at 7 or something and go up to junior school. I remember Mr. Sampson as the master there that you would most note. Teaching arithmetic and English and that kind of thing. And then you went up to junior school, and there Mr. Dotting, Hartley Dotting's father, was the headmaster there. And when I got there, Virgil Boothagen's younger brother was head boy. And the story was because my four sisters had gone there before me, that the Virgil Boothagen had been head boy there as well before. And then there was a Miss Linton. Now, Miss Linton was very colorful. She was a small woman, but dark and pretty. And used to wear a lot of colorful clothes. And she used to carry these, isn't the umbrellas the other thing that you use for sun? Huh? Parasol, right? And full of colors, and she lived in Lake Solly. So sometimes you walk in behind her going up to, as you're walking up Mason Hall Street, and she had beer style. And I remember her really significantly as my class teacher in class 1. Very pretty woman. I think she wasn't Bajan though, but she talked with a slight accent, right? And very, 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 very notable and lively. There was an Indian family that lived right at the corner, at the gate of St. Mary's Junior School. I think the house is still there actually. So if you come out of the junior school, which is school close to the Baxter's Road there, on the left-hand side, you will see Indian house. And there was a daughter, one of those girls in there, came to St. Mary's Junior School for 1 year in class 1. I remember her as Aisha Daya, okay? But I suspect that her name was not Aisha Daya, she was Aisha Degia. But I used to pronounce her as Aisha Daya. And later on, I heard some of that family telling me that they know somebody called Aisha Degia. So I believe that is the same person. But I never saw her after they took her out of school in class 1. I never saw her again up to now. I've never seen her again. But I always remember that year that she spent in class 1. I used to see when we were walking to school, coming back from school or going to lunch, you used to see Gabby running up and down the road. Okay, the mighty Gabby. He was older than I was, so he was kind of bigger than me. But I remember him as one of the people on Mason Hall Street, running up and down Mason Hall Street, because he would have lived down Chapman Lane or down behind the school, one of those places. That's some people that lived down behind the wall in the infant school called the Lavines. I remember them because I remember their house. You can actually see their house from the schoolyard. If you go back through the street and start coming back up the other side now, you have Mahogany Lane. Mahogany Lane is after it's Youth Town or Boys Town, one of those places there that the fellas used to play table tennis at. There's people like Ricky Cummins, Trevor Manning, and those were two outstanding table tennis players who went to St. Mary's School as well. Later on, there was another guy that was there, but he was not, in my time, more or less younger than I am. But Trevor also had a younger brother, Gregory Manning, who was in my class. There was another guy called Anthony Walcott, who was related to a set of tailors that used to live on Mason Hall Street. Miss Grant used to live on Mason Hall Street too, in a double-story house. I think some of the Rastas are in there now. But that house was Miss Grant's school, but she was the headmistress at the infant school. My mother, later on in her teaching career, she became headmistress at St. Mary's Infant School. So if you come out of Mason Hall Street and you're going back up Mahogany Lane, there were two girls, a twin, that were at St. Mary's that were very good friends of my sister Ermin, Amy and Eleanor Lane. And I think Amy became the warden at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Then the Osborne family, the Neville Osborne's sister, used to live in a house in that area. Her daughter Pamela Osborne, she was a very good friend with my sisters. They had four sisters, as I said. And I knew them through that, but then they were related to obviously Sandra, who was at Neutral and so on, and married to the guy that is the judge. I knew them from Queen's College then, and Mona, the Osborne girls. But the families knew each other from through the street. If you come up the road, you would have the Maxwells, both sides of James Street. Victor Maxwell and the other Maxwell. And they're family to the present Bishop of Barbados. Victor Maxwell, the two grocery, the famous Maxwell grocery shops there at the corner of James Street. The Victor Maxwell's family was very close to ours. They had David, who was an actor, you know. They had Pamela. They had Sammy, who worked for a long time in Saudi Arabia. Ruth, Charlie, who died recently from the Defense Force. That family. We used to go by them. They used to live in through the bridge. But the operation was there, so they used to be hanging around there, coming in our house, and we and visiting their house and that kind of thing. ML Seal was in front of them before you got to them. ML Seal was owned by Victor Chase. Victor Chase was a close political ally of E.D. Motley. He used to deal in scrap iron as well. So if you would have people bring scrap iron and carrying it to him, and then he used to ship it overseas and so on. He was a kind of white-skinned fellow with a kind of paunchy belly. And I think he ran for the council when they had local government and so on. But I remember, because of the little politics that was involved around that area, I remember people demonstrating up through the street and saying, vote Motley, vote Lewis. So it was obvious that what they were talking about was E.D. Motley and T.T. Lewis. That's what they were campaigning for. Right? And I just have that memory in my head. The slogan, vote Motley, vote Lewis. Because when they were advertising E.D. Motley's thing, now this is Mia's grandfather. They would have the fellow that would say, tonight, Lower Green tonight, Ernest Titan Motley. And that's how they repeat it to advertise his political meetings. He used to come to St. Mary's Church, to Evensong, at 7 o'clock every Sunday, 3 pews down from the front. The Motleys used to sit. And the Elliot, this is Mia's father, he was a server. I was a server too. But they were like big boys. They were like, he and Elton. Elton was in the choir. Elambe. Elambe was in the choir. Elliot was in the servers. I was in the servers, but I was a little boy. And they were like late teenage in years, and then they went off to study and so on. Motley dominated that church. Okay, excursions and so on. His car would be parked, and a whole set of people around the car with rum and cake and chicken and all kind of stuff. And we used to go on excursions every Easter Monday. And you would go to like Fowl Bay, Morgan Lewis, River Bay, somewhere like these places, you know. And they usually, for even whatever direction they were going in, they used to go through by Sandy Lane. But Sandy Lane wasn't there yet. And they would stop by Sandy Lane and then you check the tickets to see who's stowing where and all that kind of thing. And get rid of the people that trying to stow away. And most of them used to be paid up, okay? And then the buses would keep going. And you go to wherever the excursion is scheduled to head for that particular Easter Monday. So on through the street again, you had some street characters. I would want to divide this now though, because I remember individuals on the street as well. Like the Goodinegel, who I suspect is the grandfather, or even maybe the great-grandfather of the Goodinegel in Parliament now. I remember he used to be always in a suit, and he would be walking on through the street, right? And he had a beard. Just mention him there, but there are some other fellas then that were actually street characters. There was Dentist Bostic. I don't know if you've had Peter Bostic that is in Parliament now too. But he was a tall, brown-skinned fellow. And he used to wear a leather apron. He used to carry a loudspeaker in his hand. Not a loudspeaker, that was electronic. The one that you just could shout through louder. And he would walk up and down sometimes with a big chalkboard kind of hanging from his neck. and he would have things like he advertising things on it, and walk up and down Broad, through the street like that. You had a fellow called Goldbead, who we could not tell what his age was. He looked almost like an Amerindian. And he used to grow his hair long at the back. He was a small fella, but very fit. And then they said that he claimed that he could live forever. And so we used to just see this man that could live forever. He would be walking on through the street, you know. And I think he did live quite a long time, but I think he did now. But he did live a long time. And then, of course, there were people like Gearbox and Sharkey and that crowd. I used to see Henderson Clark too. Now, Henderson Clark had a double first from Oxford. He's a brilliant fellow. And he knew classics, and so they say something, he used to go in classical 6 in Harrison College and start talking to the boys about Latin and Greek and all that. But he used to go off every now and then, you know, and he lost his right ear. So when he went off, he would walk down the middle of through the street, and he used to walk with his hands kind of going, and he would and everybody would be saying, you know, it's Henderson Clark, you know, it's Henderson Clark, but he almost say, oh, that this guy that was so brilliant, and so on. That shop that I talked about, that when it turned into Mason Street, that was up there, the bicycle shop. I used to sell the rally bicycles. Why I know that is because first I went to Arson College, and at first I could walk to school. And then I started to ride to school, and I used to ride a rally bicycle that belonged to my father, a green rally bicycle. So the boys at school used to call it the Green Lizard. I used to park that under the hall. You could park your bicycles under the hall or at the Robert Street gate. I used to park my bicycle on the hall. But when I first started riding that bicycle, I would be a fairly small fella. And this bicycle was really long. And it had high gears and so on, right? So I could just pedal almost slow and go past everybody else. So when we got into the cadets now, we would have parades, practices and at the garrison. I coming back down from St. Anne's Fort. Winston Quickendale, who became surgeon, he was always very prominent in number 1 company cadets. So he would be in the front. And then all these other fellows that got bicycles coming around him and speeding coming down the hill. And now I'm a little boy, so I ain't supposed to be keeping up with them fellas, but all I had to do was do 2 pedals. I up with Quickendale, right? And we could float all the way down to almost down by the police station, down at the end of Bay Street. Just flying down there, the momentum used to carry right down the hill, right past government headquarters area, and go right down into the swing bridge. And then at the swing bridge, it would start to park because some people were going Bank Hall, some people were going Carrington Village, they'd be going Cheapside, and so on, so you would start to veer off in different directions. But that bicycle was fairly famous at school as the Green Lizard. That Belle used to ride because they used to call me Belle at school because of my initials. My name is George Adams Vincent Bell, and the initials are therefore G-A-V Bell. And they used to call me, as I hear somebody say Jav, I know what they went to school with me. Yeah. When I went to university now, they used to call me G-Bell, but anybody that went to Arson College with me would call me Jav Bell. On that side coming up through the street again, you had Rogers Grocery. Now you would have the barracks, the police barracks, and then there was a smaller building next to the police barracks where the police band used to stay. And then you would come to Rogers. Rogers is an old white man, and his grocery was there. He was of significance again because when we moved to Cheapside, his house was opposite to our house in Cheapside. And then you had Hawkins, another white man again. One of them I think was with Pirelli tires. The one fellow used to wear white clothes and ride a bicycle again. White shirt, white pants, riding this bicycle. And then the other guy, I think he had a car, and there were agents for the Pirelli tires. And then you would have MLC, Victor Chase's shop. Then the Maxwell's. Now you were going towards Milk Market and Swan Street.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bell. Here's a special invitation for all of you to be with us again next week at the same time as Dr. Bell continues with that exciting and intriguing journey of his childhood community and surrounding areas. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.